Hello, I'm back, and this time I'm reading La Llarona. Send me some pauses in here because I've never heard of this story so recently, and so it's gonna be stuff like that. If you like it, it was stuff, and I'm getting right into it. Legend of La Llorona, Spanish for the Weeping Woman, has been a part of Hispanic culture in the Southwest since the days of the conquistadors. The tall, thin spirit is said to be blessed with natural beauty and long, flowing black hair. Wearing a white gown, she roams the rivers and creeks, wailing into the night and searching for children to drag, screaming to a watery grave. No one really knows when the legend of La Llorona began, or from where it originated. Though the tales vary from source to source, the one common thread is that she is the spirit of a doomed mother who drowned her children and now spends eternity searching for them in rivers and lakes. La Llorona, christened Maria, was born to a peasant family in a humble village. Her startling beauty captured the attention of both rich and the poor men of the area. She was said to have spent her days in her humble peasant surroundings, but in the evenings she would don her best white gown and thrill the men who admired her in the local fandangos. The young men anxiously waited for her arrival, and she reveled in the attention that she received. However, La Llorona had two small sons who made it difficult for her to spend her evenings out, and often she left them alone while she cavorted with the gentlemen during the evenings. One day, the two small boys were found drowned in the river. Some say they drowned through her neglect, but others say that they may have died by her own hand. Another legend says that La Llorona was a caring woman, full of life and love, who married a wealthy man who lavished her with gifts and attention. However, after she bore him two sons, he began to change, returned to a life of womanizing and alcohol, often leaving her for months at a time. He seemingly no longer cared for the beautiful Maria, even talking about leaving her to marry a woman of his own wealthy class. When he did return home, it was only to visit his children, and the devastated Maria began to feel resentment towards the boys. One evening, as Maria was strolling with her two children on a shady pathway near the river, her husband came by in a carriage with an elegant lady beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children but ignored Maria, and then drove the carriage down the road without looking back. After seeing this, Maria went into a terrible rage, turning against her children. She seized them and threw them into the river. As they disappeared downstream, she realized what she had done and ran down the bank to save them, but it was too late. Maria broke down into an inconsolable grief, running down the street screaming and wailing. The beautiful La Llorona mourned them day and night. During this time, she would not eat and walk along the river in her white gown, searching for her boys, hoping they would come back to her. She cried endlessly as she roamed the riverbanks, and her gown became soiled and torn. When she continued to refuse to eat, she grew thinner and appeared taller until she looked like a walking skeleton. Still a young woman, she finally died on the banks of the river. Not long after her death, her restless spirit began to appear walking the banks of the Santa Fe River. When darkness fell, her weeping and wailing became a curse of the night, and people began to be afraid to go out after dark. She was said to have been seen drifting between the trees after the shoreline or floating on the current with her long white gown spread out upon the waters. On many a dark night, people would see her walking along the riverbank and crying for her children, and so they no longer spoke of her as Maria, but rather La Llorona, the weeping woman. Children are warned not to go out in the dark, for La Llorona might snatch them and throw them to their deaths in the flowing waters. Though the legends vary, the apparition is said to act without hesitation or mercy. The tales of her cruelty depends on the version of the legend you hear. Some say that she kills indiscriminately, taking men, women, and children, whoever is foolish enough to get close enough to her. Others say that she is very barbaric and kills only children, dragging them screaming to a watery grave. When Patricio Lugan was a boy, he and his family saw her on a creek between Mora and Guadalupita, New Mexico. As the family was sitting outside talking, they saw a tall, thin woman walk along the creek. She then seemed to float over the water, starting up the hill and vanished. However, just moments later, she reappeared much closer to them and then disappeared again. The family looked for footprints, and finding none, had no doubt that the woman they had seen was La Llorona. She has been seen along many rivers across the entire Southwest, and the legend has become part of a Hispanic culture everywhere. Part of the legend is that those who do not treat their families well will see her, and she will teach them a lesson. Another story involved a man by the name of Epifania Garcia, who was an outspoken boy who often argued with his mother and his father. After a heated argument, Epifania, along with his brothers Carlos and Augustine, decided to leave their ranch in Ojo de la Vaca to head toward the Villa Real de Santa Fe. However, when they were along their way, they were visited by a tall woman wearing a black tapelo and a black net over her face. 2 boys were riding in front of the wagon. When the spirit appeared on the seat between them, she was silent and continued to sit there until Epiphania finally turned the horses around and headed back home, at which time she had said, "I will visit you again someday when you argue with your mother." La Llorona has been heard at night wailing next to rivers by many, and her wanderings have grown wider, following Hispanic people wherever they go. Her movements have been traced throughout the Southwest and as far north as Montana. On the banks of the Yellowstone River, the Hispanic people believe that the wailing woman will always be with them, following the many rivers, looking for her children, and for this reason many of them fear the dark and pass the legend from generation to generation. Okay, that was La Llorona. There's a bunch of stories here about people who've seen them, and yeah, I don't want to read these. If you want me to read them, put them in the comment section below. Of course, me below the videos, comments. But put it in the comment section below, and comment what you want to see me read next, or if you want to see me do games next. And we'll see you next time.